This derelict lighthouse on the coast of New South Wales makes really quite a good drawing subject, as well as having an interest in form. There's lots of interest in texture and surfaces on the building as well. This took me about 30 minutes to draw in real time, and I'm drawing with a 0.3mm pen. So I start by establishing what probably visually is the key part of the drawing, which is the very top of the lighthouse here. So I draw the top of the drum and now start to put what was the surround of the actual light. It really was a very simple lighthouse. It's not particularly tall, so it's on a high spot. Now at the end I decided I made this lantern section just a little bit too large, but it seems to be basically a small stumpy lighthouse stuck onto the side of a house. So I'm going bit by bit trying to establish the shapes here, and we have this funnel shaped roof capping the top of it, and it's important to look closely because on the inside it is hollow. So we have the underside, and so there are some ribs that we can make out, which I'll draw a bit later when I put the shade into there. So now I'm trying to establish this rail. I've decided that I want to indicate some hatching for the rust staining, and so therefore I need to preserve the thickness of the railing so that I have a light line where the darker rust colour is behind it. But for now I'm establishing some of the lines of the lighthouse. Yes, that left-hand line I've just done isn't quite in the right place. I'd love to bring it back very slightly and probably push the right-hand line a couple of mil further to the right as well. But it is what it is. So now I'm adding some of the detail of the lighthouse, just really feeling my way bit by bit. There is a fair bit of foliage in the front, plant matter, these tufted strappy plants that survive well on the barren, windy headlands on the New South Wales south coast. And there's also some nice foliage behind which gives some nice framing, darker tonal values to help make the lighthouse stand out a little bit and just push it further forward slightly. So just paying attention to the actual architecture of the house part of the lighthouse here, and then trying to remember to put the plants in that overlap the parts of the house that I'm doing, and not to draw my vertical and horizontal lines too quickly, because it certainly is my preference to draw overlapping things with the closer object first to give it precedence in my line work, and to not try and have too many lines go through each other. So my plan was to basically get the outline done and then to work on the textures, but I do, for some reason, do the lines of the corrugations of the corrugated iron roof at this point when I'm actually drawing it. So now working on this front window. So I'm in the part of the drawing on the left hand side there that I probably want to draw with a bit of a lighter feel. On the right hand side, sorry, that I probably want to draw with a bit of a lighter touch. So here I am now putting the underside of the funnel ribs in place. Well, funnel shaped, it's not really a funnel of course. And also trying to create the unevenness in the values of the underside of this small roof section, because it also is rusted in different ways to different degrees in different parts that give it different tonal values. So it's trying to reflect the spotted random nature of the different values of the way the building's weathered. So I almost forgot to put this brace in place. So I saw it, and so in it goes. Just a little correction there. And now what was once the support for the light, I imagine. And we come in now with the darker rust tones and working very hard, going a bit slower than I would normally go because I don't want my lines to go through or obscure the railing, because it is quite an interesting effect having the thin light against the dark. So now I come to this brickwork, which I think is fairly important to indicate the weather-beaten nature of this lighthouse, and that it's not in good condition, that it is neglected, that the paint is peeling off and it hasn't been repaired in any way. And the way the paint falls off, it seems to reflect bricks, whole bricks underneath. So there are some bricks that for some reason or another just didn't take the paint as well as other parts. And so those parts have lost their paint more, and it's particularly in the upper part where I imagine that paintwork wasn't protected from the winds by the rest of the house, as happened lower down. So the important thing with the bricks is to get the scale right. We don't want to make them too large because then it will make the building look smaller. So we want to keep them nice and small to reflect accurately the scale of the building. So now I'm putting in this darker value behind and trying to establish some of the shapes and to get the interest of these lance-shaped, strappy plant leaves that come out in 360 degrees. I don't want them to become the focal point of the drawing, but I do want to reflect something of the underlying shape fairly clearly. And then there's quite a bit of that in the foreground. I do spend a fair bit of time on it, which sometimes is the case. This sort of detail that we have in the foreground and to the right-hand side here, often from our point of view is the less interesting part to draw, and yet we need to persevere to draw it well. Whether we draw it with a lighter touch or in the same detail as the rest of the drawing, we don't want any part of our drawing to stand out simply because it's done more carelessly. And that can be the case, particularly with foliage, I find, or where we've resorted just to using a fairly stereotyped formula. So now I'm going on with the rest of the foliage on the right hand side here. So I'm doing fairly gestural marks, fairly brisk and relatively large for the ones I've used in the rest of the drawing. And that's partly to create a less intense, a less detailed finish here, which I think will help the actual lighthouse itself to stand out more as our focal point. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. Of course, as always, this photo is available on my channel reference page. So why not print it off and have a go drawing this little derelict lighthouse yourself? But look, whatever you draw, however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.